How can we design strategy to make data valuable and create a competitive advantage? This is the question we explore today. In my video on the machine learning value chain, we have established that data is part of a larger system and discussed whether more and/or better data can help firms to make better decisions. If you haven't watched this video, I suggest that you do this first and then come back here. Let's see how we can think about data strategy. We will cover the different ways to gain a competitive advantage from data. In addition, we will take a dynamic perspective and describe the transformation process that enables firms to become data-driven. To put all this into perspective, we will talk a bit about how Facebook uses data strategically in a way you might not be aware of. So, how can we gain a competitive advantage from data? Let's start with a little reminder regarding the different ways scholars in strategic management have characterized where competitive advantage can come from. First is the idea that performance in an industry is mostly defined by the characteristics of the industry itself. Hence, it is important to take market conditions into account when developing strategy for the firm. The relational view puts the networks and relations between internal and external stakeholders into focus. Organizing these relationships is key for achieving a competitive advantage. And finally, there's the idea that it is the stock of internal resources and capabilities that define why some firms perform better than their competitors. This is the resource-based view, and the perspective we want to focus on today. We can say that a firm can gain a competitive advantage if it has resources that are valuable, rare, and costly to imitate, and if the firm is organized such that it can capture the value of the resources. In short, VRIO. So far so good. Now let's try to add data to this framework. There are 4 questions that we need to ask. The first one is, does data enable our organization to obtain valuable insights, to exploit new business opportunities, and/or neutralize competitive threat? So, is the data actually valuable? The second question is in regard to the rarity of the data. Is our data rare? Can a few of our competitors acquire or possess them? The third question asks whether it is costly to imitate. Do our competitors without data face challenges or obstacles in obtaining or developing it? Is it difficult for our competitors to imitate what we can do with our data? The final question is, does our business strategy, our way to organize, and our corporate culture support the exploitation of valuable, rare, and costly to imitate data resources? This is where the machine learning value chain comes to mind again, right? To benefit from data as a valuable and perhaps rare resource, embedding it in the broader value chain is important. Only in combination with models and algorithms and computing power, it becomes costly to imitate and therefore can create a competitive advantage. Time for an example. Consider Facebook and their data strategy. Facebook, of course, has lots of data on the preferences of their customers. Users literally tell Facebook what they like. But that's only true for pictures, stories, and products that these users see on their Facebook timelines. Facebook knows what you like from observing your behavior within their own platform. This is information that Facebook's competitors don't have. It's rare and not easy to imitate. However, Facebook's competitors, like in a broad sense, also have data that is rare and potentially valuable. There are many things on the internet that you may like or dislike. And Facebook collects data about that by convincing website owners to place buttons that say like or share on their sites. Every time you load such a button or click on it, Facebook is collecting data on your browsing activities outside of Facebook's platform. How is this type of data valuable to Facebook? In a press release from September 2015, Facebook says, "We sometimes hear from people that the ads that they see are not as useful or relevant to them as they could be, and therefore we are solving this problem by introducing online interest-based advertising." Of course, not every organization is as data savvy as Facebook. For many organizations, thinking about the value of machine learning and data is pretty new, and the organizational procedures that make data a competitive advantage are lacking. Why is that the case? Because it's difficult to change operations, especially for traditional and established firms. So, how can we think about the transformational process of becoming data-driven? Almost every organization collects, stores, or has access to data. But often data lives in silos and is under control of specific organizational units. It is impossible to use it at scale, let alone extract value from it. The data is simply stored, but not analyzed. So, how can you change that? Well, start with a few selected projects that demonstrate the value of analytics-based decision-making without making big organizational, cultural shifts. Then, in the next stage, you can start to implement bigger architectural changes to optimize how the organization handles data. For example, there could be a centralized unit that is devoted to data science and analytics. Finally, we can think of organizations almost as AI factories, where everything is centered around data. Firms that fully made the transformation to become data-driven. The value of data, in terms of quantity and quality, can come from putting different pieces of information together to create a database, with enough features and examples that vary in the cross-section and over time. But does this mean that data as a rare resource can only exist when the firm fully controls every aspect of it? Of course not. In the extreme, data can be almost like a commodity, in a sense that it's publicly available, but it can still contribute to generating a competitive advantage. In fact, many firms use so-called application programming interfaces, APIs, that give access to data from external firms. For example, to build applications on top of an existing architecture or platform. As with any make or buy decision, there's a trade-off between keeping data rare and non-imitable, and between opening up for valuable inputs from outside the own organizational boundaries. Evidence shows that firms that use APIs are more valuable on the stock market and invest less in own research and development, but they are also at greater risk of suffering damages from data breaches. Let me sum up. We have clarified that data should not be seen as a resource in itself, but always in the context of a larger value chain. We have looked at a model of the organizational transformation to becoming data-driven and went over Facebook's strategic approach to data collection.